welcome to my channel. Today I'll be sharing 5 really easy Valentine's Day decor DIYs. If you're into the rustic farmhouse style like I am, then I really think that you're going to enjoy today's video. If you do, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. Now let's go ahead and jump right into today's projects. For the first DIY today, I'm making a standing heart. For this one, I'm using this All You Need Is Love heart shape from Dollar Tree, and because this sign has a ton of glitter on the front of it, I want to remove that. So I'm taking my putty knife and I'm scraping all of that glitter off. Once I have the glitter all removed, I'm then painting my entire heart shape with my Waverly chalk paint in the color Ivory, and I am going to be using what's originally the back of this heart for the front of my project today. But I am also painting what used to be the front so that my entire project looks nice and finished. Once that color was all dry, I then took my folk art chalk paint in the color Castle on my Dollar Tree stencil brush, and I dry brushed this color around all of the edges of my heart, and then I did it just a little bit along the front as well to give it a nice rustic look. I'm also going to be using one of these sticker hearts from Dollar Tree in this project today, but I did not want to use the glitter side of it, so I just peeled off the sticker part of it and then I painted the unfinished wood portion of it with my Waverly paint in the color Ivory. Next, I'm using one of these red felt hearts from Dollar Tree. They do come in a pack of 12, but I'm only using one of them today. I'm placing hot glue on the back side of the felt heart, and then I'm placing it right in the center of my wood block heart. And then I'm adding the smaller heart that I painted right in the center of my felt heart, and I used hot glue on the back side of that to attach it. Once all of my hearts are all attached, I'm then taking a piece of jute and I'm wrapping it around the front of my heart, and I used a little bit of hot glue on the back side of the wood block heart just to hold the jute into place so that it was easier for me to wrap around. And as I was wrapping the jute around the very front of my heart, I did crisscross the jute a little bit just to give it some more detail, and then I just hot glued the end of that piece of jute along the back side. For the very last step in this project, I used another piece of jute to make a really simple small bow. Once I have the bow all made, I cut off the end pieces and then hot glued that bow right in the center of my smallest heart. And here is my standing heart all finished. This is such a simple and inexpensive project. It only took me a few minutes to create, and this is perfect for a tiered tray or shelf. Now moving into DIY number 2, I'm making a heart topiary. For this one, I'm using one of Dollar Tree's 2.5-inch terracotta pots, and I'm starting by painting this with my Waverly chalk paint in the color Ivory, and I'm really messily painting this pot, and I'm leaving some of that terracotta color so that it peeks through the white or the ivory color that I'm painting on. Once the ivory color is all dry, I'm then taking my folk art chalk paint in the color Castle on a Dollar Tree stencil brush, and I'm just dabbing this paint over top of the ivory color, and then I'm also adding another color to this pot, and this is the folk art chalk paint in the color Java, and again I'm just dabbing that color right over top of the other two colors. And then I'm using a little bit more of that ivory colored chalk paint over top of all of the other colors, and this is just going to add a nice layered, like chippy, worn, rustic look to my pot. Once that's all painted, I'm then using some jute, and I'm just using a little bit of hot glue to keep the jute into place while I wrap it around. And I wrapped it around about 4 times and then just cut the end of the jute off and then hot glued the other end piece of that down. Once that was on, I wanted to add a really small simple bow, so again just used a really small piece of jute to make that bow, cut the 2 ends of that off, and then hot glued that right in the center of my jute on my terracotta pot. Next, I'm going to be using a 4-inch foam ball and then some of this Spanish moss from Dollar Tree. The foam ball, I believe, is either from Hobby Lobby or Michael's, but you can pretty much get these at any craft store. And then for the Spanish moss, I'm just cutting that down a little bit so that it's easier for me to work with. And then I'm using some hot glue to attach the Spanish moss to my foam ball. So I would just put hot glue on the foam ball, take a chunk of that Spanish moss and place it onto the glue. You do want to be careful when doing this that you do not burn your fingers. And I continued this step until I had the entire foam ball covered with my Spanish moss. Then I used my scissors to cut the Spanish moss around the ball to give it a more manicured actual ball shape because it was looking really messy. The Spanish moss can be really messy, so just keep that in mind if you're going to be doing this project. Another item I'm using in this project are these unfinished wood hearts from Hobby Lobby. They do come 12 hearts in a pack, and I am using all 12 of them today. I'm painting them with my folk art chalk paint in the color Tuscan Red, and I only did one coat of this paint on each one of my hearts. After the paint has dried on all of my hearts, I'm then attaching the hearts to my ball right on top of that Spanish moss that I've already glued onto my ball. I placed hot glue on the back side of each heart and then just pressed that onto the ball. I continued this step for all 12 of the hearts, and I did leave a space in between each one of the hearts. And then along the bottom of my ball, I left that blank without any hearts because I'm going to be attaching that right to my terracotta pot for the very last step. And here is my heart topiary all finished. This one, again, only took me a few minutes to create. And what I love about this is it's a little bit different than your average Valentine's Day decor. For DIY number 3, I'm making a Scrabble letter wreath. For this one, I'm using one of these unfinished wood hearts from Dollar Tree, and I'm first removing the jute hanger that's on the wood heart, and then I'm using my Craftsmart wood stain in the color brown. This is from Michael's, and you can see it's very well loved. To apply it, I'm using an old towel and I'm just rubbing it on top of the entire heart. As you can see here, it's giving me this really nice stained look. And as you guys know, I love this stain so much because it's water-based and it dries really fast. Even though I really love this color, I decided to add ivory color over top of this. So I'm using just a fan brush that I had laying around, and I'm dry brushing the Waverly chalk paint in the color ivory over top of my stained heart. I just wanted this to have kind of like that rustic chippy look, so that's why I'm adding this ivory color. I'm also using some of these Scrabble letter blocks, and these ones are from Dollar General. And then one of these unfinished wood hearts from Dollar Tree, and this heart did come from the assorted wood value pack from Dollar Tree, which if you see in your store, I suggest you pick it up because it has a lot of great pieces in it. And I'm painting that heart with the folk art chalk paint in the color Tuscan Red, and I only did one coat of paint for this heart. Once everything was all painted, I started assembling my letters and my heart onto the front of my painted heart, and I just wanted to make sure that I had everything in place where I wanted it to be before I start gluing everything down, and this is how I decided I wanted it to look. So then I just started placing the hot glue on the back side of all of my letter tiles and just putting them back into place to attach them. Now I'm going to be creating my bow. For my bow, I'm going to be using two different kinds of ribbon. I'm going to be using this red burlap ribbon from Dollar General and then just the regular burlap ribbon from Dollar Tree. I cut the red piece larger than what I'm cutting the regular burlap from Dollar Tree. I did the one from Dollar Tree just a few inches shorter than my red ribbon. Then I'm taking a second piece of red ribbon and I'm cutting that a few inches shorter than my regular burlap ribbon from Dollar Tree. Then I'm going to be taking some hot glue and I am attaching the two ends of my pieces of ribbon together to form a circle, and I did this on all three pieces of my ribbon. Now that I have all of my pieces of ribbon glued into circles, I'm then stacking those circles going from largest to smallest. Once I have them all stacked, I'm then taking them and scrunching them together in the center to form my bow. I'm then using a piece of jute and I'm wrapping that around the center of my bow several times, and then I'm tying that piece of jute off along the back in a knot, and then that is going to be my bow. For the tail ends of my bow, I'm using another strip of the burlap ribbon from Dollar Tree, and I took a piece of jute and I tied that around the very center of that strip of ribbon, and then I'm hot gluing that strip of ribbon onto the actual bow that I created using some hot glue. After I got my bow all made, I then placed it where I'm going to be attaching it on my heart and realized that the tail ends were just too long, so I ended up cutting those down quite a bit, and I did cut those in a diagonal shape. Once I had the bow exactly how I wanted it to be, I used hot glue on the front of my heart and then just attached the bow to the glue to fully attach it. Then for the very last step, I'm using a piece of jute to restring it through the holes that were already in the heart, and that is going to be my hanger for my Scrabble letter wreath. And this is my Scrabble letter heart wreath all finished. This one was so easy and I think it turned out super cute. I love the rustic colors with that pop of red, but what I love even more is you can really customize it by using whatever words that you want. Moving right along to DIY number 4, I'm making a love heart wreath. For this one, I'm using one of these wood slat unfinished wood hearts from Dollar Tree. They have this one where the slats go horizontally, and then they also have one where the wood slats go vertically, and I think these are so cute. I'm also using one of these unfinished wood words. This one says love, and it's from the Target dollar spot this year, and it was $3. I'm first starting by painting the very top slat of my heart with my folk art chalk paint in the color Vintage Victorian. I did have to do 2 coats of this paint since it is a little bit more sheer. Then the next slat going down I did with my folk art chalk paint in the color Tuscan Red. You guys know I love this color, and I only did 1 coat of paint for this one. And then for the third slat going down, I used my Craft Smart wood stain in the color brown, and to apply it I just used an old rag. And then for the very bottom of my heart, again, I used that Vintage Victorian chalk paint from Folk Art and did 2 coats for that. Then for the wood in between all of my slats, I painted my Waverly paint in the color Ivory, and I used a really small paintbrush to apply the paint. Once that was all dry, I then took my Folk Art chalk paint in the color Java on a Dollar Tree stencil brush, and I dry brushed this color over top of my entire heart. I wanted it to have that rustic, distressed look that you guys know I love so much. So I did this on the entire heart, and I really loved how it looked, but I did want to add a little bit more detail. So I took that Waverly paint in the color Ivory on a smaller paintbrush, and I just lightly painted this color on top of all of the slats, and it ended up giving me more of that rustic, chippy paint look that I really like. Then for my love word cutout, I'm painting this with that Waverly paint in the color Ivory, and I did paint the entire word this color around all of the edges and then on the inside of like the scroll letters as well. Once that was all painted, I moved back onto my heart, and I'm adding some ribbon. I'm using some of this lace ribbon from Dollar Tree, and I just cut that down to size for the top slat that is pink and then the bottom pink slat as well. And then for the red slat, I am cutting a piece of my burlap ribbon from Dollar Tree down to size, and then I did end up cutting that in half because it was just a little bit too thick. Once that was all cut, I then started gluing my pieces of ribbon on. I just placed hot glue on the back side of my heart and then attached the 2 sides of the ribbon on top of those pieces of glue, and I continued this step for all of my ribbon. For my slat that I used the stain on, I ended up using a piece of this white cotton cord. I thought this would add a little bit of something different, so I just cut that piece down to size and then hot glued the 2 ends of that along the back side, just like I did with all of the ribbon. Next, to attach my love word, I'm placing hot glue along the entire back side, and then I'm just pressing that kind of in a diagonal shape right along my heart. Now I'm making the hanger for my heart wreath. I'm taking 2 pieces of this white cotton cord from Hobby Lobby, and I'm tying those together in a knot. I'm then laying that knot down onto my heart and just figuring out how long I actually want my hangers to be. Once I have that all decided, I'm then cutting the 2 pieces of white cotton cord and then tying those 2 pieces in a knot on the other end. Then to attach the hanger, I'm just placing hot glue right on the 2 knots and then just pressing those down right over top of the pre-drilled holes that were in the top of my heart. And this is my love heart wreath all finished. This, just like the other projects in today's video, was super easy to do, and I really love all of these color combinations together. For the fifth and final DIY today, I'm making a wall sign. For this one, I'm using a scrap piece of wood that I had, and this measures at 24 inches by 11.5 inches. I'm then painting this entire wood piece with my Waverly chalk paint in the color Ivory, and I did do 2 coats of this paint just to get everything covered up nicely the way I wanted it to be. Next, I'm taking one of these really small tea light candles. This one is probably from Dollar Tree, and I'm rubbing the wax from the candle on my wood surface where I want to have a chippy paint look. I've tried this method in the past and I really love the effects of it. So anywhere you want to have a chippy paint, you want to apply your wax from your candle. So I'm just rubbing it all over my entire surface and around the edges really well. Once I have my wax all applied, then I'm going in with my second paint color, and I'm using my Folk Art chalk paint in the color Castle. And I did end up painting 2 coats of this paint over top of that wax. I'm also using these 2 smaller scrap pieces of wood, and these ones are 12 inches by 1.5 inches, and I'm doing the exact same thing that I did with my larger piece of wood. I'm painting both of these with my Waverly paint in the color Ivory. Once that paint has dried, I then went in again with my candle wax, rubbed that over both pieces of wood where I want my paint to look really chippy. Once I have the wax on, then I went in with that Folk Art chalk paint in the color Castle and painted 2 coats of that over top. After all of my paint has completely dried, I'm then going in with some duct tape, and I'm applying that to the very front of my sign, and I'm just overlapping each section of tape. And then once I have the entire front covered in the tape, I'm simply just peeling back the tape, and you'll see here that all of the areas where I've applied the wax is taking off that top layer of paint that I painted on, that Folk Art Castle color. It's chipping that right away so that you can see that ivory color that I painted underneath. For my 2 smaller pieces of wood, I actually ran out of my duct tape, so I had to use some packing tape that I had laying around, and to my surprise, it actually worked just the same as the other tape. I thought maybe it wouldn't work the same because it's just not as sticky, but just know that if you don't have any duct tape, you can use packing tape. Next, I'm using some hot glue to attach the 2 smaller pieces of wood to my larger piece of wood. I just made sure that I had them centered or spaced out exactly where I wanted them to be before I hot glued them down. And as you'll see, I already have the stencil that I'm going to be using for today in the center of my wood. I'm using tape on each side of my stencil to hold it into place when I'm painting. This says, "Together they built a life they loved," and this stencil is from Joann Fabrics, but it did come in a pack of stencils. I'll try to have those linked down below in the description box. And then the paint that I'm using for all of the words, it is from Waverly, and it's the color Ink, and I'm using my Dollar Tree stencil brush to apply the paint. And once that paint was dry, I then removed my stencil. Here is my "Together They Built a Life They Loved" sign all finished. This one you could definitely use year round, and I just love the chippy paint look of this. I really hope that you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends and family. It really helps out my channel. If you're not subscribed, I hope that you will consider subscribing, and please be sure to hit the notification bell so that you don't miss out on any of my future videos. Thank you so much for watching.